Leave it a couple seconds to make sure we're going. Oh, we seem all good. Cool. Okay, so Dark Bleatings, everyone. I am here with an author interview I've been really excited to do. I'm sure many of you will recognise Simon Clarke, who has given us decades of stories so far. He's an award-winning author of many wonderful horror stories that I'm a huge fan of, including this brand new, is it Protos or Protos?
We're going with Protos experiment. I think properly it's Protos, but it sort of rolls off the tongue better. Like certainly for when the actors were making the film to say Protos. So I think Protos is a bit more gritty and grungy kind of word.
Okay, so the Protos experiment. Yeah. Which, yes, so this is a novel and also a film as of very recently this month.
Yes, yeah, it's not been released yet, but it's starting to make its way out there to festivals. So it was screened. But in fact, it had its premiere in the Cannes Film Festival last year, which was amazing. Like I said, I've never experienced anything like that before, because the Protos experiment is my first film script, my first film. So when I heard it was going to Cannes last year, it was pretty much mind blowing. Then it had its American premiere in San Francisco, and then its UK premiere in Horror on Sea at Southend last weekend. So it's, touch wood, it should be out soon for everybody to see.
I can't wait to see it. I really enjoyed the book. Would you like to tell people a little bit about it?
Yes. Where do we begin? I mean, it all began with an idea to write a film script, which is something I've never done before. So it was during lockdown about 3 years ago. And I thought, well, I'll try writing a film script. I've never done it before. I've written books, novels, short stories. I've written audio dramas for Big Finish, including an adaptation of Night of the Triffids and Survivors, their reboot of the Terry Nation series. And I thought, well, I'll try writing a film script. And I started writing, and I was hopeful it was be produced, but I had no real expectations it would be. And to cut a long story short, I finished the script. It was picked up by Brian Avenay Bradley and Lo Avenay Bradley, made into a film, shot in around Hollywood, Los Angeles, and in the deserts of California. At its premiere last year, and I'd always intended to write a book of the novel. I thought, well, I want to, grab the opportunity with both hands, a film and a book at the same time, why not? So I wrote the novel, and the story is really, it's a mingling of science fiction and horror. People have compared it to Blade Runner, and to the cyberpunk science fiction, but I'm a dyed-in-the-wool horror writer, so my line of thinking, it's more horror, like in the Keeping of Blood Crazy, this kind of thing that might happen tomorrow. It's not spaceships and time travel science fiction. It's a kind of thing that could, on the verge of happening. And the idea is that inmates in maximum security prisons in America, they can sign up for a program to have their own memories pushed back into their head and new memories implanted. It's all top secret, of course. But the idea is that the prisoners who consent to this will be rewarded. But the twist is that the people who are experimenting on the prisoners must really test these memory implants to the limit, to make sure that they hold and they don't evaporate, and then the old prisoner comes back and runs amok. Because the idea is that the prisoners will be, once they get this memory implant, could be released into society, get jobs, and just live ordinary lives. But the system hasn't been perfected, so the memory implants have to be really tested to destruction. And the way of doing that is to test the prisoners to destruction. They become lab rats. They're subjected to awful experiments, really awful tests, as people will hopefully read in the book or see in the film. I mean, it's quite an intense, film, with high levels of horror and danger and same with the book. I mean, the book expands the story because the film's 90 minutes, which would make like a 20,000 word novella, really, if I just faithfully transcribe the script. So I've been able to expand the story quite a bit. So
it was so interesting. I felt like it could have been. I'm so happy to see that it's a film, and I can't wait until it makes its way to the public so I can watch it, because when I was reading it, it felt like it would make a really good episode of something like Black Mirror, because of like that sort of existential kind of dread and horror with it. And the opening scenes I was so fascinated by what was going on, because it opens with a guy waking up with no memory of how he got into this place, and he's chained to this big guy that doesn't seem to see him, but he's murdering other people. And I was so hooked by it. And I'm a diehard horror fan, and I got so much horror from this. And truthfully, I don't even normally enjoy sci-fi very much, but the infusion here was just very much on like horror lines for me, because this is a nightmare.
Yeah. Oh,
I noticed. We'll talk more about this, but I kind of jump around as I think of things. So I reread Blood Crazy recently. I love the apocalypse, so this is and I know a lot of people love this book. I know this is a really popular one from your earlier catalogue, and I was thinking about your writing style over time, because when did this first come out? Was it, I want to say 95?
I'm trying to think now. I think 94.
Yeah, so we've got like a few decades between these works. And something that I noticed that hasn't changed in your style over time, which I really like, is that you have very nice punchy short chapters mixed in with your longer ones.
Yes, yeah. I think that's been a habit from the very beginning. I mean, just to go back to the original Blood Crazy, I wasn't a published author at that time, and I'd written 2 novels. I'm trying to think, it's going back over 30 years. I sent one to one agent, which must have been Nailed by the Heart, which was the very first one. And she invited me down to London to discuss it. She was very interested in the novel, and I'd never had a novel published at that time. I'd had 2 or 3 short stories professionally published, like in Carl Edwards' Year's Best Horror. But she invited me down to London to her office, and she actually had the manuscript in front of her, and she went through it, first few chapters, page by page, saying, perhaps get rid of that, more of that. And she said, one thing to remember is that a lot of the people who read the book will be reading it on buses and on the tube and on trains, and really they want something happening in every chapter and quite quickly, to entertain them. They don't want a long description of the seashore at dusk, and then something happens, after 20 pages. Mm-hmm. So I took that on board when I was writing Blood Crazy. I thought everything, there must be something big happen basically in every chapter. And I thought, well, if people are reading the book on buses, they might only have a short journey, so I'll keep the chapters short. So it was really quite a pragmatic approach to writing a book with the reader in mind, that they might only have 15 minutes to get the book out of the bag, start reading. So I thought, keep pumping the action, through short chapters, and it worked. I'm just so pleased with the reception of Blood Crazy. It's truly gone global. And,
people love Blood Crazy, and for good reason, because it's very unique for an apocalypse plot, because we normally see zombies or viruses wiping people out. And I don't want to spoil it for people who haven't read it, but it's just I feel like it's a really good mix of all of the stuff that people really love in their apocalyptic fiction, but it's got a really unique thing that's going on.
Yes, yeah. I don't avoid spoilers there, but yeah, because that's probably part of the stories, the revelation of what might be happening.
Yeah.
So thank you for holding that revelation back. But
yeah,
I was so pleased that, like I say, when I started writing it, I'd never published any novels. I hadn't got a contract to write the book. I had no contact with big publishers. I had contact with the agent, but just to like backfill that story for closure, the agent that was interested actually left the agency and went to live in Australia and did something completely different. So I'm not sure if it was my book that actually thought I'll change my career now. But no, I don't think it was that. But yeah, Blood Crazy was an odd one that when I started writing it, it just seemed to just blast out of my head. Just so quickly, and I think I wrote the first draft in about a month.
Wow.
So.
It's so it's really action packed, and I really like the occasional really short chapter, because sometimes I'm reading when I've only got 10 minutes to read, and it's but that's the thing about yours, is that even when the chapters are short, though, it's very Moorish. So if I have to put the book down, I'm like, oh god, go back. Do you think God, you've just written so much fiction over the years. Do you have a favorite theme that you like to work with, or threads that you like to explore?
Yeah, I guess the big one that sort of gripped me from being a teenager is the end of the world story. Like I say, I mean, I grew up loving the end of the world films. The Terror Nation TV series Survivors had a huge impact on me, where in Survivors there's a plague arrives in the world and goes global and kills basically 99.99% of the population, and basically the story is about people surviving, as the title goes, and books like Day of the Triffids and so on, these end of the world stories, I just find them so compelling. In fact, I suppose to a certain extent, it's one of those almost like hereditary brain impulses that perhaps we all have. This being alert for danger. So as we're growing up, perhaps as very young children, we're afraid of the dark. Because we sense that could be something dangerous in there. And I think we're probably hardwired to fear, the apocalypse, that something might come one day that's going to wipe us out and we're going to have to basically survive. So those kind of stories have always fascinated me. And with Blood Crazy, King Blood, Stranger, I've written a few post-apocalypse novels, and I got a chance to write the sequel to Day of the Triffids, the Night of the Triffids, which continues the story of, again, the post-apocalypse, people surviving. Because I always think, I know I say end of the world stories, but in a way, truthfully, the beginning of a new world stories. The old order comes to an end, civilization comes crashing down. There's a few survivors, and basically their story is surviving, but also rebuilding the new world.
Yeah, it's my favorite subgenre of horror, and I think it has been since I was 12 and I read The Stand.
Oh yes.
I think that must have been the first apocalyptic book I ever read, and then I remember just being so obsessed with that. And then my mum was like, "Oh, do you know what else you might like? I Am Legend," and it just set me down a path of I don't know why, I find it peaceful.
Yes, yeah. I can see that.
About me. I think it's just because I want time in my house to read all of my books with no obligations, and if the world ended and I was inside, that's not really how it would go, but that's what my brain tells me would happen. What do you like to read and watch yourself?
Well, good question. I mean, for reading, I read a fair bit of horror. You know, people like Adam Neville. I mean, who doesn't read Adam Neville? You know, it's just one of the best authors out there at the moment. I love Stephen King, and I've read books like The Shining a long time ago, but I can happily just reread The Shining again, or parts of it, because it's just so powerful. I mean, it's I don't know, it's a kind of concentration of horror language. It's symphonies of darkness. You know, it's music. It's beyond words. I think some of Stephen King's work. You know, people like The Shining, and a lot of his stories. You know, like the monkey trucks. You know, I love a lot of his short stories, which again is distilling horror. You know, the immensity, almost like a whole galaxy of horror, into 3,000 words in some of his short stories. And you know, like The Mangler. You know, it's like schlocky, cheapo horror in one sense. If you describe a story about, The Mangler's about a laundry machine that runs amok and gets people, and you think, that's B-movie stuff, which I suppose it's a B-movie plot, but how Stephen King writes it becomes, you know, this wonderful opera of symphonic darkness. You know, it's just beyond belief. And times I'll read it to see, you know, try and learn his techniques. Other I like reading, read quite a bit of history, like ancient history. I mean, perhaps it's a bit typical. I'm reading a book about the basically the collapse of the Roman Empire, and when Rome deserted Britain, and so the Roman legions pulled out, and the Dark Ages began. And again, it's a story of the collapse of civilization within Britain, but it's not an ending; it's a beginning of something new, which I think that's what's so compelling. Watching television, I like a lot of foreign language dramas. You know, it really appeals to me to see actors that I don't really know, like in Swedish dramas and Danish dramas, and they can be so dark and bleak as well. You know, particularly like the Polish dramas. I mean, just so grim and so dark, set in, again, almost like a post-apocalyptic landscape quite often, in these like set in run-down areas of towns in Poland that have seen better days. I mean, I love the grime and the grunge of it all.
I like watching foreign language horror because every culture does horror differently. Like they've got different tropes about ghosts, for example, or whatever. And like Eastern ghosts are really different to Western ghosts. So I usually find I'm very scared if I watch something foreign, because it'll be something, they'll have done something with something that's kind of familiar, but it'll be scary because it's so different, because I haven't seen it before. So yeah, they're good places to mine for ideas. Well, not mine for ideas, but I find my brain gets going a little bit more if I'm working on something, if I've seen something really different to the norm.
Oh yes, I mean a lot of the Scandinavian crime drama are almost like nudging through into horror, because you know they create these bleak landscapes of, you know, semi-darkness even in midday, you know, with these forests that seem to go on forever, and the ice, the snow. I mean, just to watch that, to you know, if you are, you know, interested in writing horror, to look at something like that and to see the setting, and to get the setting in mind, play in your mind first. I mean, you could set a horror novel or a horror story in a bright, sunny place, but to set it in somewhere bleak and dark and cold, I mean, that's, you know, your battle's almost half won there. You know, to start creating chills in people when you describe the cold wind blowing from the north, and the way the wind, you know, moans eerily through the trees. It's, you know, that's setting somebody up for then something to come lurch through the forest and to pursue you again, which Adam Neville does so brilliantly.
Oh, he always scares me.
Yeah, just a setting. I mean, you're scared long before the ghost or whatever it is appears. You know, you can describe a tumble down farmhouse in France before anything supernatural happens, and you know, you're on the edge of the seat reading it, and you know, you shivers running down your spine. You know, it's brilliantly done. I mean, that's and again, which Stephen King does so well. You know, to describe the lonesome forests of New England, or the the strange factory where in the rats. Things decaying, and there's levels below the factory, like level and a sub basement level, and they're all fungus growing there, and there's rot, and it's as if nature, abhors what human beings do, and it does its best to nature tries to break it up and damage the best of humankind's creations. You like walk down a city street and you can see that the grass growing through the pavements, and even trees growing out of gutters. Nature's just waiting to come back.
It's such a picture. I think my favorite thing about your style, and I wanted to ask if how much of this is sort of instinctual when you're writing, or if you consciously do this, but please forgive the term. I don't know if there's a better term for this, but your brand of horror to me is what I like to call good old-fashioned balls out horror.
Yeah.
Because and for anyone confused by what I've just said, I mean like the kind of horror that deals with serious themes and you care about the characters, but also it's really fun. And I think because horror kind of goes in trends for what people are picking up, and recently, and I also enjoy this type of horror, there's a lot of psychological horror is very big right now. There's a lot of stuff that's sort of like dealing with trauma, that kind of like subject matter, and I really enjoy it, but I find that stuff very heavy. I can't read book after book of that type of horror, otherwise I start to get depressed. And I find that your stories are like, it's the same feeling that I had when I first found Stephen King, and those I love his short stories because those ideas are a little bit mad, but they work, and they're really, really fun. And when I close those books, and when I close your books, I just feel like I had such a great time reading this.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, I'll try. I should write that phrase down, to use in future. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I suppose to a certain extent, I write the kind of thing I'd like to read myself, and a lot of it's, I guess, what am I trying to say? That the horror can be quite bizarre, or in some of my stories. But I want to make it believable, as if it doesn't quite happen, you feel as though it could almost happen. I mean, one of the first stories I wrote was called The Gravedigger's Tale, which appeared in Fear magazine a long time ago. I don't know, late 80s. I don't know if anybody remembers Fear magazine, but the beautiful glossy newsstand magazine. People like Steve Laws, Ramsey Campbell, Sean Hudson were appearing in there. And I wrote a story without thinking to send it there, but just quite a simple tale, but quite a bizarre one. It was set in a graveyard, and when I first got married, our house was very close to a graveyard, and I used to take the shortcut through the graveyard. It was a big one. It was in Pontefract, and it's a big municipal graveyard with quite old burials in there. And I used to take a shortcut through there because I loved walking through cemeteries anyway. But it was a beautiful place in spring with trees, flowering cherries, and all of that. But just masses of gravestones, and I think the atmosphere there seeped into me now. And then it's again, it's kind of the process of hearing bits of stories, and suddenly they all come together in your head. I mean, just to swiftly recap some anecdotes, I used to hear from like my father and my uncles growing up. They were great lovers of the real life horror stories, which they'd heard, the folk, what they call them, like the folk myths, the urban legends, and one was closer to home, that my father knew somebody. This is going back when they're mid-teens. Knew this lad who was a bit of a mischief maker, and in a cemetery nearby where my father lived at the time, they were widening a road near a cemetery, and they had to actually dig up some of the bodies, and they put the bones in a tent. And one day this lad turns up with a box and said, "Oh, guess what I've got?" Open the box and there's a human skull in there, which he'd stolen from this tent where they exhumed the bodies. I mean, this is going back so far now that, about 1930s. So everybody's beyond prosecution now or police investigation. But he'd stolen this skull. He took the skull home, and his dad was eating a meal, and this lad said, "Oh, look what I found," and held out the skull. And of course, father, threw the plate in the air and had a panic attack. And he said, "Oh, give it to me, and you'll get arrested. You'll be locked up if police find this." So the father dug a hole in the garden, buried the skull, and that should have been the end of the story. Then lo and behold, my father gets married, and the house they buy is the very house where the skull is buried by sheer coincidence. It's this lad's house that they bought years later. So my parents then, that's 15 years after the event, by the house where my father knew full well that there's a skull buried in the garden, and he had a garage built over the top of where the skull is, hopefully to keep it in place. And I always thought that was a bit of a fanciful tall tale that my father had told me. But when I spoke to my uncles, and they said, "Oh yeah, that's true," and that they knew the name of the lad who'd stolen the skull, and goodness knows what happened to him, probably he'd end up in prison. But then all other kinds of gruesome stories I'd heard through the years. I mean, I won't actually relate them now, but they found their way into the gravedigger's tale. So the story is it's a gravedigger. They're going to have to, they've exhumed a body for various reasons from long ago, and put it in a chest freezer to preserve it, which is a little bit odd, really. Why would you do that? And then the freezer goes on the blink and starts thawing out, and so they call an electrician in. And this gravedigger is a bit bored, and he tells a story of what happened. They had to dig this person up, and then it becomes, I guess, I don't know if I can call it Simon Clark twists, but things become more and more stranger. Like the woman who was buried in the grave worked in a factory where they painted radium onto watch faces during the First World War, which of course was highly radioactive. That eventually killed her. They buried her, but she continued to mutate in the grave because the radiation had got into her bones and into her DNA. And so the gravedigger is telling this what seems to be a fanciful tale. But yeah, that was one of my first short story sales. But But yeah, I like to take something quite strange and bizarre, and then try and like I say, try and make it believable that so it could sort of happen.
I love especially stories that come out now. I love anything that feels like it could be adapted into an episode of Creepshow or something, or Tales from the Crypt Keeper, because those stories were always a bit nuts, but quite rooted in with real people. So you could see them happening to an extent, and then they'd go off the rails, but in a really good way, in a really, really fun way.
I think to make it more and more extreme. I mean, with the Protos experiment, worked on that and then got into development with it, and Brian Avenay Bradley started to research it. The idea of brainwashing, and apparently in the 1960s there were CIA programs and probably other programs elsewhere where they actually did try brainwashing people, which is really quite a awful story in its own right. And then quite recently, I was talking to somebody who was a student, and we were just chatting, and he said, "Oh, what I'm really interested in doing when I graduate is to work in a program that enhances intelligence." And I said, "Oh, yeah, that sounds great." And I was thinking in terms of education, and I said, "Well, yeah, how do you go about it?" And he said, "Oh, it's through drugs. You prescribe young people drugs, but on a huge scale, like on a kind of COVID vaccination scale. Give them properly laboratory developed drugs that are manufactured in factories. Everything's clean and it's not street drugs, it's nothing illegal, but these drugs enhance intelligence. It's supposed to boost intellect. And I thought, well, that does sound quite dangerous as well. You're going to give drugs to children that's going to change, literally change their minds. Hopefully boosts their intellect, but what else is it doing? If children becoming too intelligent too quickly, often there are consequences. You see these programs about child geniuses, and then they go back to them 20 years later when they're adults, but often they're not geniuses, they become something else. And it's quite scary that you could actually manipulate somebody's brain to such an extent that yes, become more intelligent, but what are the consequences? I mean, with Protos experiment, there are consequences for putting these memory implants in. You're trying to turn hardened, vicious criminals into nice people. But what happens if it doesn't work correctly? What happens if you actually create Frankenstein monsters of the mind in a way? So, again, cautionary tales. Again, that's what horror authors do.
Yeah. Well, I think maybe my very favorite thing about this story was, so you realize like very quickly that they're in a program, and then my question then, once I realized, oh, these aren't just really nice people that have been plucked off the street. These are like the worst people. So then I was trying to guess like what everyone had done, because you introduce all these characters and they all seem a certain way, and I was like, oh, but why are they here?
Yes. Yeah. That's an interesting twist in it, that not to give too much away, but what are these people? What have they done? Are they guilty of something, or are they really innocent? Have they been in prison for a crime they didn't commit? So hopefully that will keep people, the readers, guessing. And I sincerely hope that people do try the book out and go to see the film. I mean, on the book's published by a publisher called Darkness Visible, and there's a book trailer available on the website. So if you go to Darkness Visible, you can see a book trailer which has quite a few scenes from the film. So it gives would give you a taste of what the film's like, and whether it is something for you or not.
I'll put the link for that in the description, everyone, so you can check it out. And all of Simon's information and the books and everything, I'll put links in the description so people can find all of your stuff. That was I think one of like the biggest hooks of the book for me was because everyone is presented, because when you meet everybody, they seem a certain way, and then when you realize, oh, this isn't necessarily going to stick, or this isn't what they were like a short time ago, so it was jarring, but in a really captivating way, because it was really hard to, because they're in danger when you first meet them, so your sympathies are automatically with them, and then you start realizing, oh wait, they might deserve it a little bit, I don't know. And so it's like, it's hard to know. I was still rooting for characters and feeling really conflicted about it, because I was like, I don't know. But it was just such a fun idea.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I guess there's an element of subversion about it. That you set off thinking this is happening. This appears to be happening, and these are the characters, and I'm getting to know the characters. And then every so often we turn things upside down a bit, and the character that you think you knew isn't the person that you think you know. Is have they done something terrible? I mean, I think as human beings, we all have our secret landscape inside our heads, with its ambitions or fears, which we might not talk about to the people. And if we told them, so if I said, oh, I don't know, I'm afraid of spiders, say, or Brussels sprouts, it's something odd like that. You'd think, oh, I never thought Simon would be afraid of Brussels sprouts, but I think we all have our own interior landscape, and down in the tunnels of the mind, tucked away, there are fears, and not all bad things. Some ambitions, some people might secretly cherish, to do charity work and and so on, and but perhaps just don't discuss it. Think, oh, my ambition is to go, rescue dogs in danger, and to do something like that. But I think we've all got that secret landscape inside our heads, which we tend not to reveal.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that the book got me thinking about, sort of like thematically, is, and I think it's really, really relevant today, is the like sort of idea of cause and consequence, but also does the punishment fit the crime? Is because these aren't like necessarily punishments. This is an experiment, but people, it does very much feel like people are being punished while they're undergoing these experiments. And I started thinking about I feel like society has shifted because of the internet, and there's a lot of witch hunting, I think. So someone does something wrong, and sometimes they very rightly get cancelled. It depends on what they've done, but sometimes someone is sort of like getting cancelled because of something stupid that they said 20 years ago that doesn't even apply anymore. Do you know what I mean? And sometimes I feel like the backlash in some cases, I'm like, this doesn't really fit what they did. It's
Yes.
disproportionate. So I was finding that so even when we're dealing with people who've done really bad things, I was like thinking through this book of like, would I be the one to sort of press the switch and put one of these people in one of these scenarios?
Yes.
Is that something that you thought about as you were writing it, or is that something that just sort of like worked itself out as you were going along?
I think it probably worked out as going along, but I mean, it's a good question. That, I mean, how severely do you punish somebody for doing something that society believes to be wrong? I mean, sort of, well, unfortunately, it's not that long ago, just over 50 years ago, gay people were punished for being gay. You could end up with being severely punished, lose your job, just for simply being gay, which seems extraordinary in this day and age. And obviously, 300 years ago, you could be beheaded or hanged for stealing a loaf of bread. Is that?
Yeah.
Is that too extreme? So there's, I suppose, there's big issues raised, about punishment. I mean, how severely do you punish somebody for doing something wrong, or what society perceives to be wrong? Which perhaps in 20 years from now, we might say, well, it wasn't wrong. It was somebody who was, perhaps mentally ill. There's some problem then, and also when somebody serves a sentence, in a sense, are they sort of, are all their crimes in a sense erased, and then should they be able to go back into society and be treated as innocent people again, and can apply for jobs? Because I mean, there's so many people who may commit a crime, say in the teens, something really stupid, because they were drunk, or they got in with the friends and got carried away and did something obviously wrong.
Yeah.
And perhaps be sent to prison for 6 months. But then, in a sense, does that prison sentence continue through their life? Because they can't get jobs, they can't get mortgages, they can't get loans. So, I suppose there's big questions raised. And I suppose in the book, if there's a good aspect to the book, it's saying, well, we could actually, erase the badness in somebody, put in good memories where they genuinely believe they're good people, and then they go out into society, get jobs, and live their lives. So all this, aspect of crime and punishment. This question of crime and punishment. How severely should you punish people? Should the punishment last forever, or should there be a good when they say, well, you've been punished, and go out and live your life now?
It was really thought-provoking because it got me thinking about, so yeah, if instead of putting someone in prison for say 25 years for a really bad crime, you could just erase their memories and like reprogram them, and then they'd be deemed safe, I was thinking, would people be okay with that? Because I think there's an element with public judgment where they want to see someone suffer. for what they've done. So it's like it's not even all about sort of like retribution and change. I think that as a people, we are a little bit like we want to know that if someone has caused suffering, then they're going to suffer. And it got me thinking. I was like, I don't know if that's right. I was like sat there thinking all sorts of things. I was like, I don't know if that's not really a very nice way to think.
Yeah, a good point, because I mean, like is it oh no, is it Charles Bronson film where was it The Vigilante, and it'd go out and into New York, and I think the story was that he'd put himself like in danger where somebody was going to rob him, and then because the person who was going to rob him, he could say, "Oh, you're a criminal," and then it becomes a judge, jury, and executioner, pulls out a gun and shoots the robber. And I think a lot of people are watching that film, and films like it, revenge films, or reading revenge books where some awful person gets punished, even going back to like Charles Dickens and Oliver Twist, and and generally in Charles Dickens books, somebody really awful and terrible early on in the book, and then they're suffering horribly because they've been found out and end up being like hanged or deported or whatever. So it's certainly true that, Kelly, that I think we want to see people suffer who've done wrong. But then that, I suppose, begs the question, why are we like that? Is it because all those little wrongs that are done against us through the years, like being told off by a teacher when we're 10 years old, and it was a child in the next seat who'd been misbehaving, but the teacher picks you out and says, "Oh, I know it was you," and you say, "No, it wasn't me. It was," and they say, "No, I know it was you," and then you shouldn't do that, and
yeah.
Off, and then that happens over and over through our lives, and it's a kind of reservoir inside our heads of a sense of injustice, all the things that have been done to us that we thought, well, that wasn't right, or if we've had our bike stolen when we were 14, then you harbour that anger inside you, and it grows and festers, and then you see somebody being punished either fictionally in a film, or you see somebody getting 20 years in prison, and you think, oh yeah, they deserve that. Is it because they do deserve it because they've done wrong, or is it because of this thing that festers inside of you, this sense of injustice? Need to release a little bit of that pressure inside of us by seeing somebody else suffer for a crime that they've committed. But but that is revenge. It's, I mean, the idea, I guess, of prisons isn't purely punishment, but to rehabilitate people, to give them opportunity to re-educate them, and they have educational programs and people in prison have opportunities to see psychiatrists and so on, to try and make them better people again. Sort of like hitting them with sticks and feeding them bits of mouldy bread and locking them up for 23 hours a day in a rat-infested cell. It's what does society do with the people who do things wrong?
All I know is that I think even good people do bad things sometimes, make mistakes, say something wrong, and I think we all have at least said things that we regret saying, or think, oh god, glad there wasn't a camera on me when I said that stupid idiotic thing when I was 14 or whatever. And I can only feel blessed that the internet wasn't a big thing when I was a teenager, because I dread to think.
Yeah, that's it, because it's almost like studies you minutely, and everything you do then it'd be recorded, like your tweets.
Oh my gosh, I'd like to think that I'm a better person at this age than I was half a lifetime ago, but I think that this is one of my favorite stories that you've written, and because it's so thought-provoking, and it's so, you can have so much fun discussion around it, because it just opens up loads of areas of conversation, but mostly the horror for me.
Oh, right. Yeah, when all said and done, I want it to be a roller coaster ride of thrills. It's happening, and people to enjoy the book. I mean, perhaps along the way, perhaps it does drain the if there is a festering swamp of injustice, whether that sometimes alleviates it. But I think psychologically we have all kinds of tensions that build up over our lives or sometimes over the day, and perhaps if you read something like a good horror story or watch a good film, you can feel better at the end of it. I mean, I like to think that as well, that if somebody reads one of my books, they'll get to the end of it and perhaps it has hoovered up some of the anxieties and perhaps relieve some of the tensions that they've experienced in their life. I mean, just personally, and if I go fly from an airport, I'll arrive at the airport and a bit tense. I'm going to be there in time, will train be delayed, and all those little tensions are inside you. What I always do as soon as I get through airside and I've got through customs, I sit and read for 10 minutes, and then it does me the power of good. I can feel myself just coming down and relaxing. So
yeah,
if I've got a lesson for the world today on your platform, it's try and read at least 10 minutes a day. I think you'll feel better for it. You will.
Yeah, I agree. I think a misconception, I'm always talking to other horror fans and authors about misconceptions about horror fiction that other people that don't read or watch horror have. And I find that reading horror, a good horror story for me is therapeutic at the end. I'd like to have a good time with the book, but if I'm still thinking about things and it makes me think about the wider world in some way afterwards, then it becomes a great book to me, especially if I'm still thinking about it after a period of time and sort of reassessing my outlook on things and stuff. And I think that people just lump horror into a silly category where they think, oh, it's just all blood and guts and nothing. And I enjoy the blood and guts myself sometimes, but it's much more.
Oh yeah, I think some people don't read horror. Will say, oh, why do you read horror when there's so many bad things happening in the world? And probably we read horror because there's so many bad things happening in the world. Because you might read something horrific in a book, but it's still not real. Or see something horrific in a drama, film, a crime drama or a horror drama. It's not real. The actors at the end of the day, get off the mortuary slab and wash their makeup off and go eat a slice of pizza. It's not real. But with a horror story, it takes perhaps something gruesome happening or horrific happening or supernatural horror, but it always resolves it in some way, which we don't get in life. We don't get that kind of crisis resolving itself in a satisfactory way, but often with a novel it does. I mean it still might be a bleak ending, but it's still an ending. It's a sense that something has been resolved, and to be perhaps for the characters they've learned something from it and that they go into a different phase of their life, perhaps being wiser and stronger because of it, if they survive, that is.
Yeah, well, I think I think it's win-win for me, because if it's horror based on real world stuff, like if it's something really bleak like The Handmaid's Tale, I put that in the horror category for TV and books. I find that that's sort of a safe space to work out anxieties about the real world, because it's fictional but it's based on real stuff, and also it'll be written by someone that's got the same sort of anxieties as you about the thing, so you've had a shared experience. And then if it's zombies or something, then that's just not real, and then the real world doesn't look as bad when you come out the horror story, because you're like, well, at least there aren't vampires.
It's a good point about the almost like a pooling of experiences. The writer has same experiences as you, in like mundane levels. Yeah, it's almost kind of a merging of minds, don't we? When we watch a film or read a book, you're becoming something part of something bigger, almost kind of collective consciousness, which does help. If anything, I guess that causes people unease in their lives or difficulties, often because they feel isolated, and so often you might have problems in your life. It might be something seemingly trivial, like I don't know, your fridge doesn't work properly, and you go out and you're chatting to somebody, so my fridge doesn't work properly, and somebody will say, "Oh, my fridge doesn't work properly," and you have a chat about fridges not working properly, and you go home feeling a bit better. You know, after that, you think, "Oh, it's not just me who's got a faulty fridge." You know.
Yeah, I think stress is isolating. So when you connect with something that you relate to, it makes you like, oh yeah, it's not just me. Like we're all feeling a bit like this, and yeah, it's for anyone who doesn't know, so I've been reading your work for years, Simon, and then I actually got to meet you last year at a fantasy con, which was a really that was just wonderful, and we had a really nice chat over curry because a bunch of us went out for curry, didn't we? Had a really nice conversation and talked Stephen King a lot, didn't we?
Yeah.
It was it's I love those events because when I've been reading authors like you for a long time, it makes you get like it's like a parasocial relationship where you are not aware of my existence, but I feel like I know you through your work.
Yeah,
and I feel the same about Stephen King. I've been reading Stephen King since I was 12, and I've never met Stephen King. He does not know I exist. But I still call him Uncle Steve in casual conversation like everybody else does. Is there a part, so outside of the writing part of your career, what would you say are your favorite things about what you do?
I guess like anybody, it's quite mundane things. I mean, I don't go mountain climbing or parachuting, out of airplanes. I like travel. I like visiting ancient places, watching television, reading. It's quite ordinary things. Time spent with family, time spent with the dog. I mean, usually it'd be in here with me. He's been banished to another room because he'd be probably wanting some attention.
What do you think that you'd be doing if you hadn't discovered writing?
With my interest in history, and I think would like to think I might have, perhaps got into some aspect of archaeology. That's fascinated me from being a young child. Again, it's a bit like uncovering mysteries, isn't it? Going into a bit like writing a story. You go into a field, whether metaphorically or in reality, and then start digging down beneath the surface, and then you might find bones. You might find some mysterious artifact that that might have magic powers to the people who left it there. They might have no doubt that pot with the the rabbit bones in was something special and powerful. I mean, I do love visiting like old places. It's only a couple of years ago, went on holiday to Wales, went up onto an old mound, which was an old Iron Age fort. I've been there for years and years. And I always look, because there's like the rabbits dig out holes and deposits of earth and things. And I walk around it and I think, oh, one day I'll perhaps find a flint arrowhead or something like that. Never have done. Last time I was there, I was walking along and doing the usual thing, looking down at the ground, looking at these rabbit holes, thinking, well, they're digging down into this Iron Age fort, perhaps going to bring something out. One day I did it and saw something, and I instantly knew it looked like a stone, but I thought, that's not a stone, it's a coin. And I picked it up, and lo and behold, it was a coin. And it could well have been an Iron Age coin. It was very ancient. And I could just make out like figures on it. I thought, great, I found a coin. This is what a kind of thing I've been looking for. This is something that's probably over 2,000 years old. And so what immediately struck me, I thought, I'm perhaps the first person to touch this in 2,000 years. And then, which I thought, well, I'll take this back with me. And so I started walking back. I thought, well, I've read enough like M.R. James, and whatever you do, you don't steal from from the spirits that live in the hill. So I started looking at this coin. And also I thought, well, what do I do with it? In actual fact, I can't take it because that's theft from an ancient monument. If I take it to the local museum, they'll probably think I've been on there with a metal detector, which you shouldn't do anyway. So I got this coin. And it struck me that Iron Age coins, it wouldn't be like Roman coins where Romans were using coins all the time. In Iron Age times, a coin was kind of a symbol of status or even magical power. You wouldn't have, you might have one coin in your lifetime in Iron Age, I imagine. So this coin might have belonged to somebody from youth, and then they were perhaps were buried with it. And I thought, again, what you don't want to be doing is taking this coin back and angering the whoever was buried with it. So I thought, I'll just put it back. So I put it back in the hole. Strange experience as I walked away. This really odd sense of well-being and satisfaction, and this that warm glow, as if I'd done the right thing. And it's something I've very rarely experienced to such a degree before. And I thought, perhaps I'm being thanked for not stealing the coin. And I thought, I've done the right thing. I'll go back to the cottage now and have a cup of tea and watch some television, satisfied I've not drawn the evil spirit out of the vengeful spirit out of the mound, and it'll come after me.
That's something that only a true horror fan would do, Simon, because you have to know, if I take this, I'm probably cursed.
That's it. One of my favourite stories of M.R. James is Warning to the Curious, where something like that happens. So, that coin went back where it belonged. And the strange thing is, following day, I thought, I'll have a look and see if it's still there. I wasn't going to touch it, and I went up, and the winds must have blown in the night, and they'd covered all the holes over, and I couldn't see where it was. So it's almost as if, a spectral sweeping brush had appeared in the night and brushed sand over these holes and filled them all in, which again was a moment of satisfaction, saying, well, that's it, it's back where it belongs. I feel safe now. So
the land took it back.
It's absorbed it back into itself, so it may be there for another 2,000 years, and hopefully so. I guess that's it with archaeology. I do love reading history books and watching programs about archaeologists on TV, but then again, there's all this element that, well, archaeology is a form of destruction. The digging things up, taking things away, in a sense, damaging the site. It's never going to be the same again. It's not going to be pristine. So again, perhaps archaeologists are running the risk of feeling that spectral hand tap them on the shoulder one day.
It's quite spooky archaeology when you think about it.
I guess so, yeah. I guess a lot of my inspiration comes from reading accounts by archaeologists where they say things like that. They've been digging some Roman remains up and gone back at night to wherever they're staying, and then they've woken up in the middle of the night and seen shadowy figures by the bed, and they've actually wondered if they've annoyed somebody.
Yeah. Oh wow. I think I'll stay in my house where it's safe.
Same here.
I think that's a really good spooky note to end everything on for today, Simon. I will once again, I will put the links for everything we talked about and the trailer as well in the description, so that people can find it and find your work and find you. And just thank you so much for doing this. It's been such a pleasure talking to you.
Oh, you're welcome, and thank you, Kaylee, for inviting me on board, and for thank all the viewers for watching. It's hope people have got something out of it, and if anybody out there's wanting to be a writer, whether it's a horror writer or writing in other genres, stick with it. And I think it's the best time to be alive, to be a writer. You're going to get your work published. It will happen. Believe in it.
Yeah, oh, well, I think you gave me lovely advice when I saw you in October, Simon, that I've been carrying with me while I've been working on my own stuff. So those are words to live by, everybody, if you're also an aspiring writer. We're going to do our little goatee sign-off. So we just wish everyone a nice bleat, Simon. So we can say bleat.
Yeah, thank you, y'all.